She opened the front door at noon on a Tuesday, and the delivery man went white. Not pale. White. Like someone had pulled all the blood out of him in 1 second. He was holding a package, standing on the porch of a beautiful house in the Hollywood Hills. On a perfectly ordinary Tuesday afternoon, he looked at the woman who answered the door. And then he looked at something just behind her. And he said, "Do you know this house is haunted?" She said, "Yeah." "Why do you think that?" He said, "Because there is someone standing right behind you." She turned around. The hallway was empty. When she turned back, the delivery man was already walking away. Fast. Back to his truck. He did not wait for a signature. He did not look back. She stood in the doorway of her house, with a package on the porch that nobody had signed for. And for the first time since she moved in, she stopped being a skeptic. Welcome to Haunted Stories. The woman I am about to tell you about is one of the most famous actresses in Hollywood. You know her face. You know her work. She has been in some of the most watched television in history. I am going to call her Vivian. That is not her real name. I am going to call the house the Larkspur House. That is not its real name. I am not going to name the canyon. I am not going to name the street. Because what I am about to tell you goes significantly further than what she shared publicly. What she shared in interviews was the beginning. What I researched goes all the way to the end. And the end is the part nobody has told properly. Until now. The Larkspur House had been built in the 1940s. In one of those old Hollywood canyons that has been collecting famous names since the silent film era. Singers, actors, writers, artists. The kind of neighborhood where every house has a story. And some of those stories never fully end. Vivian moved in because she loved it. The history. The architecture. The view from the canyon that on clear days showed you the whole spread of Los Angeles below. She moved in and she unpacked and she settled. She told people it was the most beautiful home she had ever lived in. She did not believe in ghosts. She said that clearly. Often. She was a practical woman. She dealt in reality. And in reality people died and they were gone, and the idea that something of them remained in a specific house in a specific canyon was exactly the kind of thing that made for good movies. Which she had made many of. And did not confuse with actual life. She did not believe. Until her friends started staying over. It was the third weekend after she moved in. Two of her oldest friends. I will call them Petra and Simone. Staying in the guest rooms. Practical women like Vivian herself. Not easily frightened. Not prone to drama. Vivian woke up Saturday morning. Came downstairs to make coffee. Found both of them already at the kitchen table. Awake. Earlier than either of them would normally be up. Eyes that had not slept well. Hands around coffee cups like they needed something to hold on to. She asked if they slept okay. Petra looked at Simone. Simone looked at her coffee. Then Petra said, "Vivian. There is a woman in this house." Vivian poured her coffee. She said, "What do you mean?" Petra said, "I woke up in the night. And there was a woman sitting on the edge of my bed." Vivian set her coffee cup down. She said, "What did she look like?" Petra said, "Old-fashioned. The clothes were old. Not young. She was just sitting there on the edge of the bed looking at the room. Not at me. Just at the room. Like she was checking on it." Vivian looked at Simone. Simone said, "Same thing happened to me. Different room. Same woman. Same position. Edge of the bed. Looking at the room." Vivian said, "Why didn't you wake me?" Petra said, "Because honestly, she didn't seem dangerous. She just seemed like she was home." Vivian called the woman who had lived in the Larkspur house before her. A legendary singer. I will call her Celeste. Someone who had recorded some of the most iconic music in American history inside the walls of that very house. They knew each other. Hollywood is smaller than people think. Celeste came over for tea on a Wednesday afternoon. She sat in the living room of the house she used to live in. and looked around with an expression Vivian could not quite read. Something between affection and apprehension. Celeste said. I should have told you before you bought it. Vivian said. Told me what? Celeste said. The original owners. The divorce. She paused. It was not a good divorce. The kind where people do things to each other they cannot take back. The woman who lived here loved this house more than anything. More than the marriage. More than the man. When the marriage ended she was supposed to leave. He got the house in the settlement. She refused. She sat in the living room with her things around her, and she said she would not go. This is my home. You will not take my home from me. Vivi. And said, and? Celeste said. She died here. Before they could make her leave. And then she stayed anyway. She said, I will call her Margot. That is not her real name either. Because nobody remembers her real name. She said, Margot never left. She is still here. She likes to check on things. Vivian noticed things differently after that conversation. Not more frightening. Just differently. Things she had been ignoring started landing. The lights. She lived alone. She was careful about lights. She turned them off when she left her room. She came home to find certain ones on. Not all of them. Specific ones. The lamp in the hallway. The light in the room off the kitchen. Always the same lights. The ones that would illuminate the path through the house at night. The ones you would turn on if you were moving through a dark home and didn't want to stumble. The doors. She was meticulous about doors. She found them open. Not all of them. The bedroom door. The door to the guest room. The room where Petra had woken up at 3 a.m. to Margot sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at the room, like she was checking on it. Vivian started talking to the house. Not to Margot specifically. Just to the house. The way you talk when you live alone and silence feels like too much. She would come home and say, I'm back. She would turn off a lamp and say, good night. She would close a door and say, I've got it. She was not sure exactly when she started doing this. Only that at some point it started to feel less strange than not doing it. At some point it started to feel like courtesy. Like acknowledging someone who was already there. Someone who was checking on the lights. Opening the doors. Making sure the house was still right. Still hers. She decided to do a seance. 6 people. Around the dining room table on a Friday night. Candles. Deliberate silence. For 30 minutes nothing happened. Vivian started to feel slightly ridiculous. Then the temperature dropped. Sharp. Sudden. All 6 people pulled their arms in at exactly the same moment. The specific involuntary movement of 6 bodies responding to unexpected cold simultaneously. The candles went out. All of them at once. No draft. No movement. Just out. And in the darkness of the dining room. In the specific silence of 6 people all holding their breath at the same moment. A sound. Small. Specific. The creak of the chair at the far end of the table. The empty chair. The one nobody was sitting in. As if something had just sat down. And the table moved. Not the movie version. Not dramatic. Just a small precise movement. 1 inch toward the empty chair. Like someone had leaned forward from that end. Then nothing. Temperature came back. Candles were relit. Nobody sat in the empty chair for the rest of the night. Nobody said much either. The weeks after the seance were quieter. Not because Margot left. Because something had shifted. Like an acknowledgement had been made on Beau. Th sides. You are here. We know you are here. We are not pretending otherwise. Vivian continued talking to the house. She continued finding lights on when she came home. She continued finding doors open that she had closed. But it did not frighten her anymore. It felt like what it was. Someone going about the routines of a home they had occupied for a very long time. Someone who did not see any reason why death should change that. Then on a Tuesday in November, a delivery man rang the doorbell. And everything Vivian had been managing to mostly feel okay about became something else entirely. She opened the door. He was holding a package. Ordinary Tuesday. Ordinary delivery. He looked at her. And then he looked at something just behind her. And he said, "Do you know this house is haunted?" She said, "Yeah." "Why do you think that?" He said, "Because there is someone standing right behind you." She turned around. Empty hallway. She turned back. He was already at his truck. Already moving. She stood in her doorway for a long time after he drove away. She was not afraid. She said she was not afraid. What she was done. Not done with the Larkspur house because it frightened her. Done because something had crossed a line she had not known was there. As long as Margot was lights and doors and the faint creak of a chair at a seance table, Vivian could accommodate her. She could talk to her. She could say goodnight, and I've got it, and make a reasonable peace with sharing her home. But someone standing behind her. Close enough for a stranger to see. Close enough that a man with a package on a porch could look over her shoulder and see a woman who was not there. That was different. That was no longer ambient. That was present. Immediate. Specific. She thought about it for 3 weeks. She walked through the Larkspur house every evening. She tried to understand what she felt. And what she felt was this. The house was not haunted. The house was occupied. By Margot, who had sat in this living room during the worst days of her life and said, "I am not leaving." Who had meant it in every possible way a person can mean something. Who had died meaning it. And was still here meaning it. Decades later. Checking the lights. Opening the doors. Sitting on the edges of beds. Standing in hallways. Making sure that whoever was in her home knew. That she was still there. That she had never left. That she had said she would not leave. And she had kept that promise. With a thoroughness that should have been impossible. On the last night Vivian spent in the Larkspur house, she walked through every room. Slowly. Turning off lights as she went. And this time when she turned off each one, she said something. Not good night. Not I've got it. She said, "I understand, Margot." She said, "I am sorry for what happened here." She said, "You were right to stay. In the last room. The room off the kitchen. The one where the light was always on when she came home." She turned off the lamp. She waited. The lamp stayed off. She stood in the dark room for a moment. Then she said, "I hope whoever comes next appreciates this house as much as you do." She left at midnight. She did not look back. The Larkspur house went on the market 3 days later. It sold in under a week. She has never said what she told the buyers. She has said only that she probably sold it mainly because of Margot. And that after something like that, you stop thinking of home the same way. You start understanding that walls absorb what happens inside them. The love. The loss. The specific stubborn weight of someone who simply refused to go. And you understand that some of what we call haunting is not haunting at all. It is just Margot. In her house. Doing what she always did. Checking on the lights. Making sure the doors are right. Standing in the hallway. Making sure you know that she was here first. That she is here still. And that no delivery man, no seance, no famous actress named Vivian, and certainly no divorce settlement, was ever going to change that. This has been Haunted Stories. Subscribe if you dare.